Hi and welcome. My name is Ashley Johnson and I'm the Business and Outreach Librarian at the Vernon Area Library. Before we get started today, I wanted to thank you all for attending and let you know that I plan to post this to the library's YouTube channel shortly after we're done. So if you like what you hear and you want to share with friends and colleagues that might be interested, I'll send it out to the group via email and it'll be posted on the YouTube page either today or tomorrow. So this program is brought to you in partnership with both Indian Trails and Northbrook Public Libraries. Together, we are the Lake Cook Career Collaborative, and we're a group of Chicago area librarians with expertise in employment and career services. The collaborative helps local residents who are unemployed or underemployed make their next career move by connecting them with expert-led workshops, on-demand online training, and other job search and career development resources offered at no cost through our libraries. So if you like the way that sounds, visit our website at careercollab.org and you can see all the other programs that we have planned in this ongoing programming series. So today I'm excited to introduce Brian Watkins. Brian is the president and founder of BTOM Consultants, a group focused on making managers great. Brian graduated from Marquette University many years ago and has been in the learning and development field for over 25 years. He has a passion for helping adults succeed and is proud that his teams have won multiple awards for effective training design, and he's currently lives in Buffalo Grove with his wife and 2 daughters and a cat. He's confident his wife and daughters like him, but is aware that the cat only puts up with him because Brian feeds him in the morning. Thank you, Brian. You could take it from here.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, Ashley, I'll trust if you can't see that or can't hear me, you will let me know.
It looks great.
Excellent. So welcome everybody to Quit Networking and Start Building Relationships. I actually want to start out with a poll question right away, Ashley. So we're going to go to that first one. All right, so true or false question. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So take a moment and put in true, false, or neither. Trick question. I'll give you a little bit of time here to. Pretty even so far, except no one's going with false. All right, so majority voted neither. Trick question, you are correct. It's correct, except it's not done, right? There's more to it at the end of it. So the real thing is it's not what you know, it's who you know and how well you know them. And that's really going to be the essence of this talk for the next 40 minutes or 50 minutes or so, is really talking about getting to know them better so that you can really use those connections in the most effective way. So we can take a pull down, Ashley.
Oh, I did. I think you'll just have to exit out.
Oh, okay. Whoops. All right, there we go. So I want to start out by I want to introduce you to Evan. Okay. Evan is a young professional. He's really highly qualified despite the blank look on his face that you see there. And he's determined to succeed. And he knew in college that he had to start becoming a networking expert. So he did. So he's been out of college for 2 or 3 years and he's kept that going. He even had, a very set regiment of he would build 2 to 3 contacts per week. So that, in January 2020, he had this huge network. He was happy with where it was going. He was successful. Everything was great. Then March 2020 hit. We all know what happened then about a year ago, right? And Evan and his team, everyone he worked with, ended up in the same position. Company said, oh, with this pandemic, we're just going to shut down, either temporarily or full time. We don't know yet, but we're going to have to let you go. Evan wasn't worried, right? He had his network. This is why he built that network, right? So he was ready for it. So he put out his feelers, didn't hear anything right away, didn't bother him, right? It takes time. Then, he started hearing some of his coworkers are getting jobs, and he was like, that's strange. I mean, I have a better network than they do. Why are they getting jobs? And it kept going like that. More people were getting jobs that he knew and he wasn't. Finally, someone he worked with called him and said, "Hey, Evan, there's a great position here. I think you'd be perfect for. Give me your resume and I'll put you in." Evan did. He ended up getting that job, and it all worked out okay. But Evan could have taken two different, lessons from this. The first one is my network worked. It just didn't work the way I wanted it to, or I thought it would. Or two, my network didn't work. My relationship with that person did. That's the lesson that I believe he should have learned, and that I'm going to try and teach you. So Ashley did a very nice job of introducing me, but I just wanted to give you a little more information. Um, I've been working with learning and development for over 25 years with many different companies in the Chicagoland area. And one of the things with learning and development, when we design training programs, we are rarely the expert. Okay. I've had to design programs that helped car technicians. I know nothing about cars, right? I even did one for some PhD chemists at Abbott Labs, teaching them about molecular models and data analysis. And I struggled getting out of high school science classes. So the thing is, I have to build these programs, I have to find experts. I am an expert at learning how adults learn, but I need to find experts in those topics. So I started trying to build network, and I had to study this a lot. And one of the things I learned was, just like Evan learned, it wasn't how many people I know, it was how well I knew them. It was how well I could count on them. And what I discovered was, I didn't need to know everyone. I just needed to know enough people well enough where they could help me. And that's what we're going to see as we go through this entire conversation today is, um, you know, get to know people much better in a deeper thing, and you'll do better off. Plus, it takes you out of thinking of in terms of networking. We all hate networking, right? Most of us, if you're on this call, probably hear networking event and you kind of, your skin crawls, right? That's normal. That's the way most people feel about networking events. So I'm going to teach you why you don't need to fear them or do them the way you were always taught to do them. I do want to point out, you'll notice that I did not use one of the professional headshots, and that was intentional. I keep thinking during this pandemic, that's probably a more accurate representation of me than the staged photo, mainly because you can't see my mouth, which is, if you saw me in the street, that's exactly how you'd see me now. With a mask on, you wouldn't see it. And that character there, if you don't recognize him, that's Ron Swanson from the show Parks and Rec. Love that show. He's kind of my favorite character in that show. So that explains that, what would normally be a horrible picture of me. So to start, I want to talk about the difference between networking and relationships. Okay, because you have to understand these important key differences. Networks tend to be long and wide. You want them to be huge, right? If you think of the internet as the classic network we all think of, the reason the internet works is because it connects me with anybody in the world, right? The internet wouldn't be that effective if it just connected me to the 10 houses in my cul-de-sac, right? I can walk out and do that. The network was effective because it was big and wide. Relationships, though, don't need to be long and wide and huge. They just need to be deep. They need to be real. They need to be sincere, right? So there's a huge difference between those two that we have to start thinking of. And a perfect example of this is LinkedIn. Okay, so on the day that I took this screenshot, I had 860 connections on LinkedIn, right? I was surprised by that. I'm like, I don't know 860 people, right? But I had 860 there. So I started looking through, and I took a screenshot of one page that's got 6 people. And here's what I discovered. Out of those 6, there's 2 on there that I've talked to within the last 3 months, Newton and Todd. Okay. Newton and Todd, I've talked to, I've worked with in various things. I know them. I know a little bit about them personally. If I were to see them in the street today, I could ask them questions that didn't just simply have to do with their profession or with me. Okay, I could ask them about their kids, or their latest project, or someone we know in common, type of thing, right? Those other 4, though, I looked at and I went, well, Anna, I know she's in my field. I've seen her in different things. I don't think I've ever met her, but I've seen her in different publications and things like that. The other three, I have no clue why they're on there. I don't know. My guess is that at one point they were salespeople trying to sell me something and they thought LinkedIn was a great connection point. But I've got these people on there who I would never reach out to. My guess is you have some of those people too, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I also want to point out here the term connections. LinkedIn uses that term very clearly, and other social media sites like Facebook uses friends. Those meanings have terms. Connection is a horrible thing. There's no emotion there, right? I mean, I imagine if I went to a cocktail party, back when we did those things, and I said, I'd like to introduce you to my wife. She's a first level connection. That would not go over real well, right? And LinkedIn does that too. It's first level connection, second level connection, third level connection. There's no emotion, there's no feeling behind that. You don't feel any connection to it. I don't consider Todd and Newton first level connections. I consider them friends, acquaintances, people I've worked with and had a good working relationship with. So we have to get out of the term of thinking connections, which is what Facebook does to us. Okay, a couple of the other things there. Networks are structures, right? They are things, they are buildings, they are wires, they are all those inanimate objects. Relationships are people, it's human, right? That's what we crave for when we want to help people, is those human connections. It's what we've been missing so much during this pandemic, right? The human connections with other people, not being able to go for coffee, not being able to hug, not being able to shake hands, little things like that. So again, a network is a thing. Relationships are people. Networks are all about acquiring. Okay. You just want to keep building and building and building, right? If you see cell phone commercials, what do they always talk about? We have the biggest network. We have the biggest 5G network. We've got the best 5G network, whatever it is, right? But it's always about building and acquiring, getting bigger. That's where a network becomes helpful. Relationships, it's about maintaining. You will grow, right? And growth is good, but it's really about maintaining and taking those relationships deeper, right? The last part there, networks can't be measured, or networks can be measured, relationships can't be measured. Okay. I can measure a network and say, we've got X number of nodes or this many users or da da da, da, or I have 860 first level connections or whatever it is. Relationships can't really be measured. I mean, I guess some social scientist somewhere could, but there's this person who I know really well. There's this person who I know kind of. There's this person who's an acquaintance I've met a couple times, but really don't know much of it. It varies too much. It's too much on a spectrum. Okay, so I want you to stop thinking in that network mode, because that's really what this is all about, and then go to that relationship mode. When you start talking about even professional things, right? You want to make sure that those connections are deep, that you're dealing with people and humans, that you're working and maintaining it, and you're not worrying about measuring it. Okay. In that example at the very beginning, Evan said, I'm going to get 2 to 3 people per week. He was acquiring a network. He wasn't building a relationship and maintaining those. Okay, I want to talk about how connections work, because it's important and there's a lot of science that's come into this. So let's say there's you, right? There's you, and you work on a team of 5 people, right? So it's a team of 6, 5 other people. There's 4 of them you see that are darker, right? Those are people who you work with a lot. You have a really solid connection with. Because you sit next to each other and you're in projects a lot, you tend to talk about what we did this weekend and your kids and your family and this and that, and you really know those people. The person who's gray, that's someone who works in your team, but you don't know. Maybe they're new, maybe they're remote, maybe you just don't see them in any meetings or anything. They have a totally different function, but they're on your team and you obviously know their name and can say hi to them. All right. Now, what's fascinating that I'm going to show you in just a second is how those 2 levels of connections impact you once it goes out a level. So let's say I have one of the people who's a good connection on my team, good relationship, right? She has 3 really solid relationships outside of our team. Now, what the science has shown is that I have an advantage with those 3 people who I've never met because of that strong connection with her, right? In our minds, psychologically, When she makes a connection with one of those people, even if I've never met them before, they feel a stronger bond with me. So it's me, and let's say that that's Maria there. And Maria says, "Hey, Brian, I'm going to introduce you to Billy. And Billy is great at this, and he's going to be able to help you." Billy has an instant connection with me because of his trust with Maria. All right. So when I have that close relationship, I really get an advantage beyond that with her close relationships. That's why relationships matter. Now, when you look at the person who I don't have a close relationship, she can still have three great relationships that she's close with, but I don't get that benefit because when she connects us, she kind of says, "Well, there's this Brian and he's a guy I work with, and I don't really know him that well, but maybe you can help him." Her connections don't have that strength in that bond there. So every time you build a deep connection with someone, your network doesn't expand by one, it expands by one plus all of their deep connections. Right. So that's really what you're striving for, is to make sure you, and that's what we're going to talk about in just a few minutes about how you do that. But that's the goal. All right, Ashley, it's our second poll question. If you wouldn't mind putting that up. All right. So, what is the best way to build a professional connection? Work at the same company in the same profession, have kids in the same school, be introduced by your mom, or meet for coffee regularly? I'll give you just a minute to pop in your answers. All right. Everyone seems to be going with the, ooh, got it now. New one for your mom. Give it another five. Okay. So, we'll end it there. Perfect. So, the winner was work at the same company in the same profession. Actually, it's a trick question again, because really all four of those work to a certain degree, but the best way is to have the kids in the same school, right? And what you'll find and what we'll discuss later, and you'll see this in the examples, is exactly this: personal connections top business connections always, right? So yeah, all of these will work, but the one that's going to work best is um, though is that personal connection with the kids. So there's three steps we're going to cover. The first one is prepare, develop your mindset. That's this session. All right. So by the end of today's session, you should be pretty much done with number one. Check that off the list if you're one of those people who loves doing that checkbox, right? I am that person. So it's just thinking about those relationships differently, right? I'm not out there to get a business card and to just meet as many people as I can. I want to find ways to connect deeper, right? So that mindset type of there. The next thing to do is purge. Okay. Remember when I showed you my 6 connections and I said 3 of them I had no clue why they were on there? They're not there anymore. Right? I took them out. I purged them. I said, why have I got these here? I would never contact them. I don't even know who they are. I don't know why they're. So I just purged them. So I want you to do that with some of yours. Start to think about that network you have and those people and go, why are these people here? Do I truly know them? Do kind of the Marie Kondo type thing, but don't hold the network that person up and say, does this person bring me joy? Not that type of thing. Say, do I have a relationship with this person, or do I want a relationship with this person? If no, because they were just, like I said, someone who connected with me who I have no clue and we've never talked, gone. Can always get it back if I need to, but it's not helping me at this point. Then that third thing is going to be talking about producing it. Okay. How do we, and I want you to create your plan to build the relationships with a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about here as we're going. Okay. So first thing I want to talk about is rebuilding a dormant connection. Okay. So now we're getting into the actual hows of everything. So a dormant connection is someone you've known in the past who you just lost touch with. Might be someone you grew up with, went to high school with, college with, lived in a different city at the time and knew them, worked at a different company and knew them, whatever it is, but it's someone you knew. The key is it's someone you had a relationship with. Okay. Again, not necessarily when I say, keep this in mind, when I say relationship, I'm not talking best friend, just talking knew more than name, rank, serial number type things. Rebuilding those dormant connections is not only easier because you have that connection to them, it's easier to rekindle it because it was once there. They give you a vast access to people that you would have never had. So a great example of this is, I'll use high school. Okay. So there's two people in high school. There was one guy I knew who we were in the same class together. I knew his name. We never really hung out together. We didn't do any of that stuff, but I knew who he was. We went to the same high school. There was another kid where we had a couple of classes together, but we played baseball together too. We were on the same team for 4 years, graduated together. We hung out once in a while. I knew him, those type of things. That first kid who all I knew was he was in class with me, that's not really a great dormant connection to rebuild because what would I say? Hey, remember me? We sat in Mr. Brockhouse's English together. Well, we had nothing there. Whereas that other guy who I play baseball with, I can call and go, hey, remember when we did this and that? And I can rebuild that connection too. Now, dormant connections are awesome because, again, you can start them very easily, right? But they also give you access to this wide, more diverse network because they've gone and done other things, this person. Odds are they're not in the exact same profession you are, the same city or whatever. So they've got a diversity and they add a diversity to your connection of relationships that you would never have. It's, a lot of studies have come out that said these dormant connections prove to be invaluable for a lot of people. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm doing this. Oh, I was thinking about that too. Let's go into business together. Not that fast, obviously, but it kind of gets to there as you rekindle that connection. Or something more common is, oh, so Brian, what are you doing now? Oh, I do management training and coaching. Hey, I've got a friend who's been struggling, who's a manager. Would you mind if I had him give you a call? No, awesome. Diversity, someone who I would have never talked to before, all of a sudden can do that through that dormant connection. So one of the first things you can do is start to think about those dormant connections, right? Who can I go back to and say, let's rekindle that, let's rebuild that a little bit, right? Because that's really what you want to start doing, those dormant connections. Okay. The next thing is focusing on temporary teams. So we're all on multiple teams in our lives, right? It could be your department at work, a project you're working on. They could be outside of work in a personal setting. A church group, you're part of one of the groups at church that's smaller part of the bigger group. It could be a book club. It could be something you join to at your local library, any number of things, right? But we're all on these temporary teams. In the I'll say old days, in the past, one of the mindsets companies and people had was we wanted teams that stayed together a long time, right? Because they had to know each other. There wasn't, getting up to speed. It was all this thing. My dad was in one of those teams, right? He worked 42 years at the same company and basically with the same guys. Once in a while, someone come out, but for the most part, over those 42 years, it was the same people. 42 years in a company, and he was like one of the lower seniority guys on the team, right? The company wanted that. We've learned that's not beneficial now in today's society, in today's economy. Those long-standing things just don't exist as well. So you have these temporary teams that you tend to move from. And that's actually good because the more temporary teams you're on, the more you can develop that relationship with them. And then you can expand that out. So, when you're on that small team, build that relationship with those 2 or 3 people who are on the team, like in the graphic there. Then when I move to another team, I still have those relationships and the new ones I'm going to build, provided I maintain those old relationships. There will be some that you can't, right? There's just so much time in the day, or you go, there's just nothing here. That's fine, but you want to try and build those. Now, the temporary, what's the time frame for temporary? It really varies, right? But one of the things that I've done personally is I try to go, if I'm on a team, I don't want to be with that same team exactly as it's structured 3 years from now. Okay, so when I joined a group at church where we were, working on something, I kind of told them when I started, hey, 3 years and then I'm going to go, and I'm going to do something else in the church, but that's pretty much it. You got me for a good amount of time, but I'm not going to stay forever. keeps you fresh, allows me to do those different connections and do all those things. Now, if in temporary teams, it's not always you moving. Sometimes it's you staying still and everyone else around you moving. So if you work in a team of 5 people, right, a department of 5, okay, and every 9 to 12 months, someone leaves and someone new comes in. Well, at the end of 5 months, you're still in the same team, but everyone else has changed. Well, that's fine. Those are temporary teams because there's flexibility and there's movement. Um, you can stay at the same company, but maybe a different job. My wife was awesome at this, right? She worked for a company for over 10 years, but about every 2 to 3 years, she would move to a different position in a new team, right? It kept her fresh. It helped her build those relationships. She knew a ton of people in the company. She was a great person. If you said, I need to know who would know X, she probably either knew them or knew where they were, right? So the second thing you want to do is think about those teams you're on. How long have you been there? Is it time for something fresh? Have you built up relationships with those people and really work on that? So that's another tip. Now, this chart that's there, I hate it, but it's a good representation of it because I'm horrible at math. So I said there'd be no math today. I was told there'd be no math today. Um, there's this weird thing called super connectors, right? I know we've all gotten used to the phrase super spreader in this pandemic world, but this is super connectors. And the best way I can explain this is if I were able to hear all of you and I were to say, how many connections do you have? Just give me a rough estimate. They would all be below average in terms of the number of connections. And the reason I can say that with this confidence is because these super connectors skew the spread. So to kind of put numbers on it. So let's say I had 100 connections, Bill had 200 connections, and Tasha had 300 connections. Well, the average number of connections would be 200. Bill would have the average amount, I'd have below average, Tasha would have above average. But that's not really the way it works. The way it works in real life is I have 100, Bill has 200, Tasha has 1,800. She skews the curve. So now the average is 700. So Bill and I look like slackers, right? So there are these super connectors out there, and there's a lot more of them than you think, right? This isn't one or two people who, have this. There's a lot of them out there who just have that skill, who have that knack, who have that, I don't know, charisma, personality, whatever it is, but they seem to have relationships with a ton of people. Not the network where they don't really know people, but relationships. The best story I've ever heard is Brian Glazer, who works in Hollywood. He actually is the partner of Ron Howard, who did the movie Splash, was on Happy Days, all those shows. Brian Glazer is a super connector. He has that ability where he will go to anyone and he will ask them a bunch of questions and get to know them and share himself with them. And he literally seems to know everyone in Hollywood. That's his gift, right? Now, the great thing about super connectors is you don't have to be one if you don't want to be, right? If you want to be and you have that skill, go for it. It's awesome. If you do not want to be, though, you do not have to be. That part about that connection, how when I'm close to someone, I get their connections as well. That happens double with super connectors, right? So when I know a super connector, I not only have access to that vast network, those vast connections that they have, but those connections start to see me as a super connector as well. For some reason, psychologically, if I knew Brian Glazer, I don't, unfortunately, but if I knew him, the people who knew me would think I was just as big a super connector as he is, which would help me in building all those connections. More people would be coming to me. I'd be able to build all those connections deeper. And it becomes this weird phenomenon. So another technique that here is if you know a super connector, or even maybe not super, but pretty really darn good, connect with them and make sure you build a relationship with them. Should be easy because it's easy on their end, but you get a lot of benefits from their diversity there. All right. I'm going to pause here. Ashley, have any questions come in that you want that I really should address, or anything that's
I don't see anything on my side, but if people do have any questions or if they have any comments, feel free to use the chat feature.
all right? Excellent. So I will keep going. So now, how do you build these connections? So first, build through activities, connect through activities. So you see the two gentlemen that are on that picture, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, a combined net worth of, what, $48 bajillion. Okay. They have a deep connection and a great friendship. It is not from business. Okay. They actually started, Warren Buffett was a pretty good investor, not as famous as he is now. Bill Gates was a, president of a company, but Microsoft wasn't what it is at the time that they met. They met over a love of bridge. In the picture, you can see that that's what they're doing. They're playing bridge. Through that connection, they developed some business things because they started to know each other through bridge. It's like Warren Buffett was famous for, I'm never going to invest in tech. I don't understand it. Bill Gates was, well, I can explain it to you. So we started doing a little investing in tech, right? So it wasn't until after they had developed that bond through an activity that they were able to develop that business connection, right? So this is things like games, bridge, teams. Do you cheer for the same teams, whether they're professional teams, your kids' teams, whatever? Same interests, same passions. Anything that you can connect with at that level is going to help you, right? We develop better through connections than we do through work. This is why that I talked about, your mom or having a kid in the same school is the thing that helps you. You have a connection through an activity because you're probably going to the same events, you're doing this and that's how you meet. Okay. My insurance agent, we've known him since my oldest daughter was in kindergarten, pre-kindergarten actually, because he had a kid the same age. We got to know each other. It's awesome. I talk to him once or twice a year, and we've got that relationship, and we help each other, right? So you want to try and find these builds and activities. So a story to give you an example of this. There was someone in I don't know who this person is. I just kind of heard the story, but they like to have dinner parties. They're a super connector of sorts. And they like to have these dinner parties where they invite 8 to 10 people. Okay. But there's only two rules. At the dinner party, you will be making dinner, right? Everyone has a job, and he puts you in a team of two, and he'll say, you two are going to make the salad, you two are going to make dessert, however he does it. He has all the ingredients at his house, whatever. The second rule is first names only, and you can't talk about what you do professionally, right? So it forces them to talk on these deeper levels of doing an activity together, and they can't fall back on so what do you do? Oh, I'm a teacher. Huh, that's interesting. Those type of things. They have to dig deeper, right? So if you want to build connections, start to find activities that you can do with people or use the activities you're currently doing to do it. Just keeping an eye on time here. So next thing, and this goes into that relationship part. Focus on the people, not the profession. Okay. There's this woman named Shelly Zalis. Okay. Right now, she does networking and she does all these great associations and organizations. But at one point earlier in her career, she worked in the consumer electronics field. And she would every year go to the Consumer Electronics Show, the big show that was out in Vegas in January. It was huge, right? But consumer electronics is a predominantly male field. So she would feel awkward and uncomfortable going to these things because there weren't that many women around. So one year before it started, she sent out a note to like everybody she knew, and she said, hey, I am going to this. Okay. I'm going to this session. And if anybody wants to meet me, I'll be at this hotel in this location at this date. And a couple people showed up, and so they got to know each other. They did the same thing the next year, and it got bigger and bigger. Eventually, they had 17,000 people in this organization that they called the Girls Lounge. All right. And they would go and they would do things together as part of their group and walk through the trade show together and everything. But the quote I have there is what I really focus on. She says, no name tags are required in the lounge. 17,000 people, you'd think, name tags are good, right? You want that. But she said, because it encourages us to learn something new about people other than their title and where they work. Okay. That's the key because there's a connection beyond that. We've gotten so used to particularly in business functions. Oh, what do you do? Oh, Brian Watkins, I work with blah, blah, blah. There's not much there. Once we start dealing with you as people, that's different. Now, here's where hopefully you kind of caught something I did earlier. Talked about that picture that wasn't the professional headshot. I wanted to put something in there different, and I wanted that character in there because that's something personal about me. Now, maybe you like Parks and Rec, and you can go, "Oh, you can send me a note. Hey, Brian, I really like that show too. Da 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 da. We build a connection." Or you could say, "I've heard that character. My wife loves that show." Whatever it is, but something about me beyond just my name and profession, right? And that's kind of the key. You want to go beyond the name and the profession. All right. Talk about people as people. This is all we want as people. Okay. We want to know this. Quick aside, when I work with managers, one of the questions I get from a lot of more experienced managers is, I don't understand this younger generation, right? I can't work with these Gen Zers, these millennials, whatever you want to call them. And all I say is, they don't want to be known as a millennial. They want to be known as who they are. That's all you have to do. Connect with them as people. That's the goal you have. So stop thinking about professions, start thinking about people. Figure out a way that you could never do a name tag. Um, I'm not that great at names. I try to get better, but I'm not that great at it. So with my kids in their school, when we go to the open houses, I'd hear the teacher's name, but I would never remember it, but I would remember some interest. And that's how I would refer to that teacher with my children. And my daughter would say something about the teacher. I'm like, oh, that's the one who went to the University of Minnesota, or that's the one who runs marathons, or that's the one who blah, 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 right? I was able to much better remember them as a connection, not as a profession, not as what class they taught, right? And that's an important thing to do. Start doing that for yourself when you present yourself and your brand, and start finding that from other people. It'll be easier to remember. All right. Next tip. When you're making these connections, you want to be relevant to the person, which means you have to listen, right? I like the meme there. My wife just said you're not listening to me, and I thought that's an interesting way to start a conversation. Guarantee my wife, if she were here, would be going, nodding her head, right? That type of thing. But it's important that because you want to have that relevant message. You want to listen to what they say and pick up on those hints. What are those personal things that I can make that connection with? What are those things that we can bond over? And to do that, you truly have to listen. Okay. You don't want to be, we have this habit as people. You've heard of active listening. The problem with active listening sometimes becomes listening to respond, right? What we want to do is listen to listen, not worry about the response. Okay. I've had to learn that the hard way, as I think many people have, is, don't start thinking of what you want to say back to this person. Listen to what they're saying. Then you can go with what you want and think about it, right? But you have to listen if you're going to build these personal relationships. All right. That's really, really one of the critical things that you have to do there. I know it sounds silly in terms of that, but it really is there, because you will miss so many things, right? And let's go back to that picture at the beginning. If you were, finishing up an email or finishing your lunch or doing this or getting your computer set up or this and that going, this is all introductory stuff. I'll catch up when the important thing is there. You missed a way to connect with me. You missed something of interest that went beyond my name and stuff. You may have been thinking, oh, well, I can look at the name because it was on the email or it was on the chart or it'll be in the slides afterwards or whatever. If we don't listen and we don't pay attention, we'll miss a lot of those little hits, those little things that come in, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to look for all those habits. Salespeople are taught, if I have any salespeople on the call, one of the things you taught when you would go to in person, again, in a world when we could actually do that, you would look around the person's office to see about there was something to connect. Oh, is that your family? Oh, you went to the University of Illinois. Oh, whatever it is, right? You're trying to find those connection points. But you have to make yourself very aware of them, right? My last point is piggybacks on that one is be present, avoid multitasking. You can only do one thing well at a time. You are not the exception. It's hilarious. Everyone I talk to says don't multitask. Oh, I've gotten really good at it. Moms have this skill where they go, are you kidding? With all the stuff I do, I can definitely multitask. No, you just figured out how to do 20 things at once, but you're never giving your full attention to anything. Little dude in the picture, always got to have a little dude in a tuxedo, makes every presentation better. He's saying multitasking is a fancy way of saying you're not giving anything your full attention, right? You simply can't do it. Science says when you get distracted by something, it takes you 45 seconds minimum, probably several minutes, to be able to return focus back to what you were doing before. All right. So think about it. Every time you let yourself get distracted in a relationship building thing, you're wasting minutes and minutes and minutes that you don't have. Right. So when you're trying to build a relationship, really be present. Don't be looking at your phone. Put your phone away. Do those things. Make sure you're focusing on it because you are not the exception. All right. So Ashley, I'm down to my last poll question here, and then I've just got a few last things to clean up, and then we can open it to questions. All right. So this is kind of me for me. So out of all these things that we talked about, dominant connection, temporary teams, super connectors, activities, or none of the above, which one of these techniques do you think will be the biggest help to you? Dominant connections get a few. Oh, activity, yep. Awesome. So we got 60% were through connecting through an activity, 30% through the dominant connection, and 10% through the temporary team. Good. Yeah. So that activity, it's an awesome way to do it, right? And again, it's easy to build that connection. A big joke in my family. So I was born and raised in Wisconsin. I am a Packer fan. You can boo me and I can't hear you, and I'm good with that. But the joke with my family is it doesn't matter where we go, I will find another Packer fan. Either I'm wearing something Packer and they see something to me, or they're wearing Packer and they see something to them. In fact, we kind of have a little contest now. We don't bet on if I'll talk to another Packer fan when we're on vacation. It's how soon in the vacation will I? And inevitably it happens. See if someone with a Packer hat, hey, go Pack, you're from Wisconsin. And all of a sudden we get in this big conversation, and my daughters are like, especially when they were younger, they were so embarrassed that dad would do this. But connections are an awesome way to do it. So again, all these techniques I've given you, use the one that will work best for you. You don't have to use them all. All right. So I want to finish up with a few cautions, right? So now I've given you some of the to-dos. Here's some of the to-don'ts. Relationships does not mean BFFs, not best friends. It's not deep. It's not they're going to be best man at your wedding, or they're going to be the friend you call when you're dying and in the hospital. No, it's just someone who you know at a deeper level, right? So when I teach managers and I teach them they should have relationships with their teams, the test I give them is, as a manager, can you tell me the name of the partner and or children of someone who works in your team? Because if I'm working with you on a day in, day out basis, I'm going to know your kids. It's going to come up in conversation somehow. You're going to talk about your wife. If you can't tell me the name of the spouse and the names of the kids, and probably even their ages, or at least an approximation of their ages, you're not developing a relationship. But it doesn't mean you're best friends. It doesn't mean you're going to dinner and week-long vacations with them, those type of things. So when I talk relationships, I'm talking about just knowing them at a deeper level. Then there's this thing called homophily. It comes from David Burkus's book. If you want to check Friend of a Friend out of your local library, highly recommend it. It's an awesome book, and it talks about a lot of these concepts as well. But homophily is essentially the bias that we have to go to people like us. So if you look at the people you have relationships with, and it goes beyond simply having a similar interest or whatever, but in my case, they were all white men in their 50s in the professional world, and I didn't know anyone else. It's probably a bad sign. I've probably taken that homophily, that bias too much. You want diversity. You want different ages, you want different genders, you want different races, you want all those different things, different professions, right? You're going to find connections that you normally wouldn't, so you want to make sure you're really in there, right? All of these items, customize it for you, right? If you're a type A personality, you probably wrote down all of those things and you're like, I'm going to go do all of them today. Don't do that, right? Pick one or two, work on them, really perfect them. Maybe go to another, maybe try one of the other ones, right? But really kind of customize this for how you are as a person. We are all different, right? When people start talking about introverts and extroverts, they're really talking about a scale, not two set points, right? I am an introvert to a certain degree, which people find funny because they're like, "Well, Brian, you do presentations and you talk to all these people." That's an introvert isn't someone who doesn't like to talk. An introvert is someone who it struggles with it a little bit, right? It takes their energy. An extrovert loves these things, right? I will tell you, as an introvert, when the pandemic started, this is my wheelhouse. I can just stay in the house. Even now, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, man, it'd be nice to meet someone for a cup of coffee or lunch or dinner, right? Those type of things. Um, Pleasure before business. Connections are easier when they're not business related. For some reason, and I haven't seen any good research on this or haven't really figured it out, but for some reason, business, we have a much more cautious relationship to it, as if it's not real. And that may be a generational thing, right? When I was growing up, it was, work and personal are separate. Then it became work-life balance, but they were still separate. Um, Now they seem much more intertwined, whether that's good or not, but it's always easier to talk about pleasure things, not business, right? And because we still are in a virtual world, we're not getting out as much as we'd like to. Virtual works. Okay. You can do this virtually. Hopefully, as you've been seeing me on camera, you've seen that I have facial expressions and movements and these things. It is not as great as the 3D where I could walk around the room and really feel my energy, but you could probably feel it a little bit. So don't start thinking, no, virtually doesn't work. It's just hard to make a two-level connection. It's just different, right? And you have to adjust to those differences. Have to be shorter, can't be people talking over each other, those type of things, but these things can work, all right? So, oops, with that, I'm going to just do a little end. So again, this is my contact information. So feel free, anyone, if you have any questions about this, you want to talk about something further, please do shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm more than happy to talk about any of these things with you. Can answer questions, clear things up, um, share any of these resources. If you want these slides or anything, please just let me know and I will be happy to do it. The only thing I ask is don't just send me an email that says, Brian, I was on the call. Tell me something about yourself, some way that you think we have a connection. Oh, Brian, I like Parks and Rec too. Oh, Brian, I'm a football fan, but I hate the Packers and blah, 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 whatever, right? Because I want to be able to see that, build that connection. It will make it more memorable and more fun for me. Hopefully it will for you. So I thank you for your time and patience, and I hope you got a lot out of it. This is a topic that means a lot to me. Um, that's really all the information I have. Um, so I'm going to turn over to Ashley to see if any questions came in chat.
Yeah, I have one, and then there's someone that's raised their hand. I'll get to in a second. But
Okay.
someone asked, do you have any special advice for introverts?
Yes. So introverts, again, I am one, right? I am the person who hates the networking event, right? When someone says going to a networking event, I'm like, can I get a root canal instead? Maybe now's the time to schedule that type of thing. I will say as an introvert, most introverts, again, it's a spectrum, so I'm generalizing a little bit here. Most introverts are intimidated by the scope and size of it, right? So don't focus on that. Focus on, I want to get to know one or two people. That's a great success. And I will tell you the best thing to do is to have an unusual question. All right. So I tell my children this, or somewhat introverts as well. Have an unusual question. So my favorite question now when I go to a networking event is I go, hey, since pandemic, what's the best show you've binge watched? It's different than what do you do? What's your name? What's your profession? Those type of things, or why are you here? And it gets us talking at a different level. And they may go, oh, it's Queen's Gambit. Oh, I saw that. I loved it. or they mention some other show. I haven't seen that yet. What's it about? Even if they go, I don't watch TV. Oh, really? How have you been passing the time? Oh, I read. Great. What's the last book you read? So introverts go in with a few specific personal questions, relationship questions, not too personal. You know, don't want somebody to get mad at you, type of thing. But that way you can do it. So just kind of have those questions in your head, and you'll start to develop those relationships. And with the introverts, that's where we tend to start feeling comfortable. Once we get past that initial thing, we can develop a deeper thing.
Do you have any, I guess, next steps then? So how do these relationships turn into jobs? How do they turn into, things that come to benefit you?
Sure. There's no process, right? I'm a process person. There's no build a relationship, then say this, then do this type of thing. But what you find is through the relationships, because then you have to maintain them, just share things. And it's as simple as, here's the big struggle I'm having now. Here's the big problem I'm having. Here's this and that type of thing. It's not a process. It's not here's the next step. It's just be aware as you're listening and you're trying to be relevant. You will see opportunities, and they're not predictable, but they're there. They're always there. And perfect example of this just happened recently. I had met some people who I called and we started talking, and we were just chatting, and I mentioned something about, need to sell my father-in-law's house. Oh, I know someone who's a realtor in that area. Do you really? Could you keep all of a sudden? And I met with that person Saturday, and that person's already going to already figured out he's going to put our house in the market. You can't go in saying I want this. But you have to be very attuned to them. They are there when you're open and building those relationships.
That's very good. Are there any other questions? Feel free to put your question in the chat. It reminds me, Brian, of a group that I'm a part of in the Buffalo Grove, Lincolnshire Chamber. It's like a referral network. So the idea being that you do business with people that you know and you like and you trust. So if you're not getting a job, or if you're not necessarily finding monetary, it's not turning into dollar signs for you, at least you're supporting people that you enjoy and you like, or that you trust. So
yeah, and more often than not, those things do turn into those things, right? So yeah, it's work with those people that'll bring you joy just from the relationship itself.
Someone asks or sort of mentions there's lots of drinking at networking and social events, and I'm not a drinker. I immediately feel like an outcast and the relationship falters. Do you have any ideas?
So my guess is that's more on you than them. I will be honest. When I go to networking events, I don't necessarily pay attention to someone whether they're drinking or not, right? So that may be kind of something you're kind of thinking of yourself, going, you're a little self-conscious of it. But you may even make that part of your thing. You know what? I don't drink, but I'm really fascinated. What are you drinking? Type of thing. Learn about different things. But yeah, I haven't heard or seen any research about that. I just think that tends to be something I know I do that several times. Oh, I'm looking like this, or I'm not wearing the same clothes. I'm not as dressed up, or I feel like I'm from out of town. Just be aware if that's more you kind of putting that on them, or if that's something that's really there.
Very good. All right. Well, I learned a lot about you, notably that you're a Packers fan. So I don't know.
Notice I don't share that at the beginning. I wait until we're involved in something before I share that. I've learned that living down here.
There was a sort of an answer to the previous question. Someone says, just say that you're not drinking tonight. You don't need to make a big, thing about it. Maybe you're on an antibiotic. Okay. All right, everyone. Go ahead.
I do have my chat up. I pulled it up. And Joe, yes, I will laugh that you caught that for me. Thank you. Joe was one of
So-
my connections who I've worked with in the past.
Somebody mentioned there was a typo. I don't think everybody saw
Yes.
that. All right. Well, this has been a pleasure. I learned a lot. I like that there's a science behind it. You know, there's habits that we all have. That super connector thing was really interesting. So thanks for sharing what you did and what you know with us today, Brian. And if you're interested in sharing this with your friends and colleagues, like I said, I'll share it via email after we're done here, and you can reach out to Brian if you have any other questions for him. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.